a concern for really the increased ability of the Good Friday Agreement to bring people together. So the resolution expresses the hope for justice for the victims of Bloody Sunday, one of the most tragic days during the Troubles, on its 50th anniversary. It does acknowledge the progress that's been in place going forward, but obviously deals with some concerns in this resolution, not only recognizing the rest of the story that's not been acknowledged with Bloody Sunday, but also recognizes America's stake in the Good Friday Agreement as it pertains to Brexit action, as well as the blocking of the UK to follow its own agreement on the protocol. In the resolution itself, we went back to acknowledging first and foremost, because it is acknowledging the 50th anniversary, we acknowledged and paid tribute to the ongoing concerns, unfortunately, that the descendants of those who lost their lives during that terrible day. And we actually give great credit to them bringing the ball forward, as difficult as it is for them, with a gathering in Derry that was held to mourn, to stand in solidarity with the families as a whole, and to commit themselves to the cause of justice. This just follows up the natural order that on the second investigation into the Bloody Sunday, the second inquiry, that the result was clear. There was no doubt that the shootings took place on that day and that they were the result of wrongful actions taken by British soldiers. And also, it recognizes the fact that in 2010, now 11 plus years ago, that Prime Minister Cameron, while addressing the House of Commons, apologized on behalf of the British government, saying the events that took place on that Bloody Sunday were unjustified, unjustifiable, and wrong. So the record is clear in that respect. But what we need going forward is greater accountability and justice for the victims of Bloody Sunday. And that movement would take us to an essential step toward addressing Northern Ireland's legacy of violence and also its efforts in promoting reconciliation. The resolution has many points. I won't get into all of them, but among the most important, we resolve that as a House of Representatives in Congress, that we are officially expressing our support on the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday for the 14 individuals killed and those injured that day. Calls upon the parties, all parties, to take meaningful steps to peace and reconciliation. It supports the full implementation of the Good Friday Agreement to ensure peace and stability on the island of Ireland. It supports justice, justice for the victims of Bloody Sunday and the Troubles, as well as families of those victims. It calls upon British authorities to charge individuals who committed unjustifiable crimes on that day. And it also officially opposes efforts made by the British government to try and implement amnesty or statute of limitation laws that would end or inhibit investigations and prosecution of the crimes committed during the Troubles, including on Bloody Sunday. We also ask and are grateful for the support of the EU in fully implementing the Northern Ireland Protocol as agreed upon in the interest of maintaining peace and stability in the island itself going forward. We all know that the majority of the people in the United States, the United Kingdom, the Republic of Ireland, we know that we share many strong governmental, societal, and cultural relationships among us. And I trust and believe that the majority of people in those countries clearly want to see accountability to the victims. They want to see a protocol that will work going forward, that does not undercut the peace and the ability to cooperate going forward among these countries, and making sure that there's no hard borders going forward that would pose a real threat to the Good Friday Agreement. All these things are in common interest. So why the resolution? Why have a resolution saying what I believe most of the majority of the people among those countries agree with? Because it's important for all of us that believe in justice, that believe in accountability, that believe that lives taken unjustly should not be taken without the full investigation of authorities and the full prosecution of those authorities, so that we can put this terrible chapter behind us. There's much to look forward to on the island. There's much to look forward to with our transatlantic relationships. And I trust that this resolution will make the position of the United States government, it's shared by President Biden, it's shared by Republicans, it's shared by Democrats, and it's shared by anyone that wanted to make sure that the hard work that resulted in the Good Friday Agreement is not in vain. So I want to thank you for your continued work. Your voices are critically important. They truly reach both sides of the Atlantic, and they mean a great deal to members of Congress like myself, who want to make sure that their efforts to bring forward concrete feelings about where the United States government stands in resolutions such as this, making sure that that voice is carried forward. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Muted, Danny. Muted, Danny.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ancient Order of Hibernians in America Justice webinar, Operation Achille, a study in collusion. We had a few technical difficulties at the beginning of the webinar. Some of you did not see the full portion of Congressman Keating giving us his update on House Resolution 888. We will post that section separately as soon as this webinar is concluded. The resolution now has 37 bipartisan co-sponsors, and we have a commitment from 4 more. So we anticipate this to really take off. Thank you again, Congressman, for your efforts. Now to our webinar, and our host, National Freedom for Ireland Chair, Martin Galvin. Martin.
Thank you very much, Danny. And again, we thank Congressman Keating for that resolution that opposes any attempt by the British government to have an amnesty or a statute of dressed up as a statute of limitations to prevent investigations, to prevent criminal prosecutions, to prevent ombudsman's reports such as the one we're going to be considering today, anything that looks into the conduct of British forces, particularly with regards to collusion. We have 3 representatives or family representatives whose family members were victims of the described in the report done by Marie Anderson, a police ombudsman, a British government official, appointed official, into killings in South Belfast. And then we're going to have 3 elected political leaders. We're going to have Representatives Niall Blaney from Fianna Fáil. We're going to have Barry Ward from Fine Gael and John Finucane, an MP from Sinn Féin. They are all going to be around. This is not just a bipartisan issue in Congress, as Congressman Keating mentioned, but it's a bipartisan issue that can bring together the 3 largest parties in the Dáil together to support these families. And we're going to begin first with one of the victims' family representatives, Bosco Kennedy. Bosco, you were 17 in 1992. You went to school that day. You had a brother who, because he was 2 years younger than you, was at a different school, had a day off, probably thought he was fortunate, And when you returned from school that day 30 years ago, you saw a number of people around the Sean Graham's bookie shop in that area. You found that there had been a shooting, and you found out later that one of the victims who'd been killed that day was your 15-year-old brother, James Kennedy. Your father was one of the early campaigners to lead a fight for justice for an ombudsman report. When he passed away, couldn't see the results of that. You took over to lead for the family. Now you have that report. What are some of the things that stood out to you that make that report so important?
Well, the first thing that I got from the report was relief. Relief that we finally got it after 30 years. Over the 30 years, there were so many barriers put in front of all the families that at times we never knew if it would ever come out. Even in the past 2 years, there was delays and just obstacles constantly put in front of us. The second feeling was definitely justification. Justification that after 30 years, we finally got a report and people got to know what we already knew, that there was collusion in the murder of our loved ones, the 5 in the bookies and the 6 other people involved in the Achilles report.
And one of the things that really started to, that you found out, even though you knew there was collusion in that incident, you knew there was collusion in the other killings in the Ormeau Road, what are some of the things that Marie Anderson made public that startled you and surprised you?
It was, she said, one of the things that ultimately she found that she thought the murders couldn't have been prevented. The thing that I don't get with that is that the gun used in the murder of Aidan Wallace was then used in the bookmakers attack on Sean Graham's. That gun was actually handed into the special branch, given to the special branch by one of the informers. It was actually given back to the Loyalist murder gang who carried out the attack on Aidan Wallace and then the bookmakers. So for her to say that the murders couldn't have been prevented, I found a wee bit off. If they hadn't given the guns back, surely these attacks wouldn't have happened.
Now, one of the things that was in the report was, I believe she named or pointed out that there were 8 informer agents, people who were working for, who were employed by, who were paid by, and given information by British Crown forces in the north of Ireland, that they were involved in 27 murders and they were allowed to carry out those murders and were paid for. What is the impact that information has had on you and some of the other family members that you're involved with in the campaign?
It's horrendous to think that our family members didn't have to die, but the protection of the informers was considered more than the lives of our family members. And that's what it came down to. They thought protecting these people who were giving them bits of information here and there was more important than stopping our loved ones being murdered.
All right. And I know it's very difficult for you. You have to go through this, think about your brother again and this incident. You come on, I know you haven't been involved with media interviews before this campaign, before the report was released. You come on to speak to people in the United States. How important do you think American help is for you, for the other family members in the Ormeau Road, and for the groups that you work with, like Relatives for Justice?
It's immense. See the support that we've got from the groups like Relatives for Justice. I don't think we'd have got to the stage where we got a published report. We need support from all corners of the world. We need people to understand what Boris Johnson and Brandon Lewis are trying to do. There's hundreds of families out there who deserve a report the same way we got our report. When we got our report, there was relief, there was pleasure. It's not the end of the road for us, but it certainly brought justification for our case and the fight that we've been doing for 30 years.
And again, one of the things that must have given you some relief, the British have been promising or moving forward with these laws that would cut off ombudsman investigations, cut off any investigation. And if that statute had been passed before your report was issued after so many years, you wouldn't have been able to find out the information, to get the vindication, to get the relief, to get all of the information that you were able to get. And I know that's why you're concerned about other families. Finally, you saw a similar report, Operation Greenwich, in the Northwest. You've seen similar ombudsman investigations, similar findings, where it seemed the same sort of tactics are going around all across the north of Ireland. What conclusion do you draw from that?
There's only one conclusion you can draw. It wasn't a couple of road police officers or a couple of road soldiers. This was a policy, and it was a policy in the north of Ireland. And that's the only way that you can read it. Also, with this report, or with this amnesty that the Boris Johnson is looking to bring in, it's only one thing. It's looking to protect British soldiers and British forces from going to court or being brought to court, and there's no other way of looking at it.
All right, thank you. We're going to go now to Siobhan Clinton. Siobhan, you were 3 years old, and your father made a decision that he would simply run as a candidate for Sinn Féin, which made your family a target. And when members of the Loyalist assassins came into your home and he was not present, they killed your mother, Teresa, at that time when you were, again, 3 years old. You've been involved in this campaign. You've been involved in trying to get this report. What is it that stood out to you as you finally read the report that was issued by the police ombudsman?
From reading the report, I just found it very hard to take it in that the murder of our mother could have been prevented. And I just found that very hard to digest, that the fact that the Ombudsman stated that had our family had have been informed of the imminent threat, that the murder could have been prevented. It is very hard to understand that, that this was a policy and that this is a direct result of it. Also, one of the most shocking things that we read as a family from the report, that one of the weapons used to murder our mother was an RUC issued gun, and the police officer who owned the gun refused to cooperate with the report. Again, the other gun used was also a deactivated gun. So it's just, there's many factors throughout the whole report, but it's just very hard to take in and fully understand why that we weren't informed that there was threats against our family, and had have been informed, that our lives could have been completely different.
Right. Now, one of the things was there were a number of threats made against your family, and a decision was made that they weren't passed on to you. Do you have been given any explanation as to why the fact that when there were death threats made against your family, they had information from these informers and others that your family would be targeted? Why would these number of threats not passed on to you so that your family could take precautions or act with that information?
No, there was nothing that was stated about that in the report. It did state that my father was aware that his life was under threat in 1989. So come the further times that his name was mentioned, so from 89 to 1994, as early as 2 weeks before my mother was murdered, that the RUC didn't think that was important information to pass on for our family to be able to put mechanisms in place to protect themselves.
And there were, I believe, at least four warnings that are given, or that the RUC, that the British forces knew that loyalists were going to attack your family, as you say, 2 weeks before, never passed on to your family so that they could act on it. Yeah, no, nothing. Which is, when you think about that, like I said, that it was as early as 2 weeks before, had they made my father aware, then our lives could have been different. Everything could have, that could have been, things could have been put in place to protect our family. All right. No, the guns were provided by Crown Forces. No warnings were given to your family. One of the things that I've heard you on the radio, on British radio before, there was a statement after the report was issued. There was a general statement by the PSNI, which is the successor force to the Royal Ulster Constabulary, saying that they regret some of the things. It was a form of an apology. And I know you feel very strong on the fact that you reject that there was any sincere apology given to you, your family, or any of the families involved. Why is that?
I just think that the apologies are relevant when you look at the report, and in every family situation throughout the report, that it states that the police officers involved refused to cooperate. So I don't understand how the PSNI can come out after the Ombudsman report has been issued to say, you know, those things when the report was being investigated and the family's murders were being investigated, that the police officers involved wouldn't cooperate. So that door's being closed, regardless of the apology. There's still, and the report, there's still doors being shut in families' faces.
All right, so what you're saying is there are former members of the RUC who have pensions. There are present members of the PSNI who are being paid by that force, who are asked to give information by a police ombudsman set up to investigate, who have information about killings, about murders, about informers, and they just don't have to say anything if they don't wish to do so. So they don't have to give that information and decline to give information, which seems like it's showing that they have something to hide.
Yeah,
Is that
exactly. That's exactly it. Yes.
Okay. Next, we're going to go to Mark Sykes. And Mark, you're in a different position. You're actually a survivor of the Sean Graham bookmakers attack. You were actually in the bookmakers at the time when Bosco Kennedy's brother was killed, when 3 other men were killed. And I just want you to describe what that attack was like. When we're talking about all of these individuals being killed, exactly how was it that these individuals, the UDA, the loyalists, went through to kill these other individuals, to wound you?
Well, obviously the attack took place on the 5th of February 1982 around 2:25 in the afternoon. It was the day after the attack on the Sinn Féin Advice Centre by a member of the RUC, and I had been reading a newspaper in the bookmakers about that attack, and just for a split second in my mind I thought that could quite easily happen here, and the thought hadn't left me, and the door was kicked in or kicked open, and 2 gunmen were standing at the door with balaclavas on and obviously army type jackets, and the first one had the VZ-58 assault rifle, and he opened up on everyone in the bookmakers. The bookmakers was a small room. It was like 28 feet by 11 feet. And I was sitting on a stool facing the door, and I was hit right away. And I ended up on the opposite side of the floor. And the shooting continued for maybe another 10, 20 seconds with the VZ-58 assault rifle. And then there was a slight pause, and a second gunman came in, and I could make him out from about the knees down, and I knew that he was in to obviously kill people, and I heard single shots being fired, and he was killing people as they lay on the floor. And I knew then by the layout of the building, there was only one way in and one way out, and I knew he had to come back past me, and I put my hands up over my head, and he shot me then under the arms, where he tried to obviously shoot me in the head as he left the building. And this all happened in around 40, 50 seconds probably. It was so quick. And they left again, and I thought they'd actually set the place on fire as they left because of the smoke that was in the place. It's actually a small room, and I don't recall any noise or anything else in the place, but I could look, I was on my back at this stage, and I could see over my shoulders, and I could see Jack Duffin, who was killed. He was 67 years old. And on the other side was Willie McManus was lying. And along the wall in the fetus position, more or less, was my 18-year-old brother-in-law, Peter McGee. And they were the only people I could see in the building, along with an injured person who was sitting propped up against the wall, who'd been shot in the leg. And within a number of seconds, then people started to come in, and a first person came in was a woman, and she screamed and ran back out again. And then other individuals came in and tried to obviously keep people alive, and there was towels brought in to stem the bleeding on some of the individuals who were lying there. And then for some reason a priest appeared, and Father McHugh, and he started giving people the last rites as they lay on the floor. And then maybe again, it's all happens so quick, it's in seconds.
Mark, one of the things that you've mentioned that led you and the other family members to believe right from the beginning that there was collusion is that there were Crown Force checkpoints nearby, but yet they didn't interfere with the attack. They didn't arrest anyone on the way out of the attack. Gunfire must have had a loud sound that must have alerted people. What is the information that you have about that?
It seems that Mark is froze up. Martin?
Mark, are you still with us? All right.
While we wait for Mark to get reconnected, we're going to move into our next segment, which, and I think one of the things that's really happened around the United States, around Ireland, through the north of Ireland, throughout the UK, is we have so many people united against these amnesty proposals, and the level and the quality of people that we've been working with is second to none, and we really appreciate all their help. So next to some of our friends from Ireland, first up, Senator Niall Blaney. Niall is the Fianna Fáil spokesman on Northern Ireland, and Martin is going to welcome you in and with a few questions, I believe, Senator.
Right, Senator, you're a member of the Fianna Fáil party. Taoiseach Micheál Martin is a member of your party. He recently met with Mark Sykes and some of the other victims. What is your position, your party's position on the new amnesty proposals that the British want to introduce that would cut off investigations like this and stop the truth from coming out for all the other families that have been waiting for it as these families have?
Well, first of all, Martin, can I say you're right in saying that the teacher did recently meet some of the family members, and can I just first of all say in relation to Mark Sykes there that watching a victim like that giving a presentation on something that happened to him, I no doubt he's reliving the whole situation over again, and we appreciate what he goes through. In fact, the Taoiseach was really appreciative of the time that he took to explain exactly what happened that day in the Sean Graham bookmakers, the detail he went to, and he was struck by it, absolutely struck by it. But the Irish government are very clear that they absolutely oppose all efforts by the UK government and the Boris Johnson administration in relation to an amnesty and dealing with issues of the past. I suppose we all felt that post the Good Friday Agreement, we were on a platform that we all felt were pretty safe on. And certainly since Brexit has been imposed upon us, sands are shifting to the extent where I suppose the power of the European courts are constantly trying to be eroded through negotiations on the protocol, calls for an amnesty being brought in by the British government. That goes absolutely counter to, I suppose, the whole principles of the Good Friday Agreement, but also it goes against the principles of how the Good Friday Agreement was founded. It was one that was founded on respect for everybody around the table. And the proposed amnesty is reckless in that regard. It's damaging the Good Friday Agreement. But I also wish to state how appreciative we are here across the water from yourselves to the constant, I suppose, across the board political and even the Irish roots, how strong you are in the US in relation to your opposition to these proposals on amnesty by the UK government, and moreover, again, how strong the current administration under President Biden is in relation to steps being taken by the UK administration in undermining parts of the Good Friday Agreement and efforts to try and move Article 16. I have no doubt, and many here have no doubt, that we would not be in a stronger position as we currently are without the efforts made by all the parties in the US, and particularly the current administration.
Senator, I know next month the Taoiseach will be coming to Washington. That's a very important state occasion. Would you be willing, and I'm hopeful that he would receive it, I know you're close to him, would you be willing to advise him that bringing up this issue, speaking out against the British amnesty laws, would be an important occasion? If he would do that in the United States, I know it would have a great impact in the administration and on the families, some of whom you're listening now, who will be listening back in Ireland, who would just appreciate using that important occasion to raise this important issue.
I believe it goes without saying, you can be sure the Taoiseach will be raising that with President Biden. I myself am a special guest in Scranton this year. I'll also be using that occasion to raise it there. And any occasions that we get the opportunity as government representatives, and there's another government representative online today, I'm sure he'll give the same opinion, where we get the opportunity and where we can garner support in relation to this, we'll be welcoming it and we'll be pushing to ensure that the efforts by the UK government are thwarted and moreover called out for being reckless as they are. And in the hope that a lot of these difficulties, I suppose, has arose since the Conservative government got back into power in the UK. And moreover, we would be hoping that the situation and the body politic is changing in the UK, and we'll be hoping to see a change of scenery at the helm in the UK.
All right, thank you, Senator Blaney. We're next going to go to Senator Ward, Barry Ward from Fine Gael. And Fine Gael has Simon Coveney is the present foreign minister from your party. He has been a leader in standing up for the Stormont House Agreement, for opposing any of the amnesty proposals that the British have. What's the present position with him, with your party, in terms of these amnesty laws? Do you think that the British are going to go forward, and what efforts are being made to stop them?
Well, whether I can predict whether the British are going to go forward or not is probably something beyond my pay grade or anybody here. But as you've said, Martin, Simon Coveney, as Minister for Foreign Affairs, has taken an exceptionally strong line on this. There is no equivocation whatsoever in relation to him or any other member of government in terms of their attitude towards what the British government has done here. And what's striking to me is that a number of weeks ago in the Shannon, we brought forward a motion proposed by my colleague Senator Emer Curry in relation to this. It is the first time I think we've had a motion that has gained support from every quarter. In fact, every party in these islands, I think, supports the notion that what is being proposed by the British government is wrong, and the notable exception to that is probably the Conservative Party in Britain. When I spoke on that motion in the Senate here, one of the things I said, I'm a barrister, I'm a lawyer, I practice still here in Ireland, and so to me the rule of law is incredibly important. And what's strange is that throughout our training as lawyers here, because our system is founded to a large extent on the British system, as yours is in the United States, we have always been told that Britain is a bastion of the rule of law. And this is exactly the opposite of that. They have thrown the baby out with the bathwater, and they've contradicted everything they purport to stand for in that regard. And Siobhan Clinton earlier talking about the apology being meaningless in circumstances where it's contradicted, the same is true here. That apology that was made by David Cameron rings very hollow when you see the same party, the same government turning around and suggesting that they are going to overturn the normal expectations we have of a justice system that holds people to account for crimes committed in the past. And that is on all sides. I think the whole thing about people who are the victims of crime is that they have a reasonable right to expect that the system in their country will hold to account those who committed those crimes. And I think it is the very least we would expect of a modern democratic system.
And in addition, families who've been looking information, as these families have, they would be cut off any opportunity to get it. And should mention, just when we're talking about collusion, one of the great suspicions is that they were involved, collusion was very much involved in the Dublin Monaghan bombing attackings in your own district and own area, and that the full truth hasn't come out, but it might be the same policies with regard that these were involved with the Sean Graham's bookies and some of the other areas around the north that have been highlighted recently.
That's exactly right. And in the course of discussions about this, Dublin and Monaghan have come up as well. Those who have family members who died or were injured in the course of Dublin and Monaghan, or as you're all aware, a long list of other atrocities. The notion that they are now facing a situation where people who are responsible for those bombings at whatever level can walk away without consequence. Even if you look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, it is not the case that there was no consequence. And if you look even at the agreement in respect to the Good Friday Agreement, the consequences they might face are greatly reduced. Notwithstanding that, it's extraordinary, I think, that the British government is suggesting that now they should do away with any consequence whatsoever. And I think it is also enormously damaging, not just to victims, not just to their families, but to the whole system and its credibility.
Okay, thank you, Senator Ward. We have Mark Sykes back. And Mark, I had just asked a question when we lost you. You described the attack, the way in which they were able to go into a nationalist area, kill 5 people, wound you very seriously, even just have a second gunman go in, try and do headshots, execution shots. One of the things that you had spoken about that concerned everybody, that indicated that there was collusion, was that there were not 1, but 2 British Crown checkpoints that would have been nearby, would have been in a position to interfere, stop, prevent that attack from going forward, certainly would have been in a position to respond to it and arrest those who had carried out the murders. Could you explain that?
Well, actually, the night before the attack on Sean Graham's bookmakers, there was a blast bomb had been thrown into a builder's yard that had been carrying out work for the security forces. And that building had top of the range military surveillance cameras around that building. And from around 10 o'clock the night before, the British Army and the RUC were in situ around that building after that blast bomb had been thrown in. And they had actually been sitting 30 yards, obviously, from the bookmakers up until around 15 minutes before the attack. And while the attack was taking place, there was a vehicle checkpoint, an RUC vehicle checkpoint around 200 yards away outside a local television studio. And that was in place before the attack, and during the attack, and after the attack. The UDR, the British military checkpoint, which was 30 yards away, was lifted around 15 minutes before the attack. So they could quite easily see who was going in and out of Sean Graham's bookmakers, how many was going in and out of it, and could quite easily have contacted loyalists, which we believe they did, to tell them that there was a number of people in Sean Graham's bookmakers at the time. And it was for that reason then that they chose to go in to do Sean Graham's bookmakers. They had planned to do a local bar, but they had changed their mind because they believed that there wasn't the numbers in that bar to kill. So someone had to be given them that information, and it was fluid information at the time. So then when they carried out the attack, they left just as they came in without hindrance and drove away. And the vehicle checkpoint, the RUC vehicle checkpoint, remained in situ at the time. So from that point on, families then believed that there was collusion in the attack. And people had been stopped early that morning by these same UDR soldiers and questioned. So people were well aware of these checkpoints in place during and after the attack. And I think it was then that families started to question the fact that there was collusion in the attack. And 1 week after the attack, what was normal practice here at the time was that there would be a reconstruction 1 week to the day of the attack. And when a journalist asked the senior RUC inspector who was dealing with the murders for the ballistics and the history of the weapons that had been used, he refused to give that. And from then on, for the next 30 years, families were involved in a campaign to get the truth about their loved ones being murdered.
All right, now you've been one of the leaders of that campaign. You've worked very closely with Mark Thompson, Relatives for Justice, to go forward to finally get the report that you have. What are some of the other things about the weapons, about British agents being involved, about any of the other items that you were able to learn through the report, through the investigation that led to the report, which you've been pushing and working on for so long?
Well, I think through the campaign from the early stages, we were aware, I think around 2007 or so, after Judge Corey's report, that the Browning 9mm pistol had been taken from a British Army base on Malone Road in South Belfast by Ken Barrett, who was involved in the murder of John's father, Pat Finucane. And he was sent in to take those weapons. He took 2 SA-80 assault rifles and 2 Browning 9mm pistols. At one stage, he came back out and told his special branch handler that they were looking for details of their names. And the special branch handler told him to go back in. They know all about it. So he went back in and took out the 2 SA-80s and the 2 Browning 9mm. He then gave them to William Stowey, who was a special branch agent. William Stowey then handed one of those weapons to RUC Special Branch. The RUC Special Branch then handed that Browning 9mm back to the UDA. The VZ-58 assault rifle was part of the arms shipment brought in from South Africa in the late 80s, where hundreds of weapons were distributed among 3 loyalist groups, the UVF, the UFF, and Ulster Resistance. And those weapons were then used to murder Irish citizens in their hundreds at that stage. So we have been campaigning around those weapons. And they were 2 points that obviously we were aware of. What we weren't aware of was that there was 8 UDA informers working for RUC Special Branch that were involved in multiple murders up until around 27 murders they have been involved in. And this report, Martin, is 326 pages, and it looks into the murders of 11 individuals. We have identified at least another 15 individuals in South Belfast alone, which we can attribute to that same death squad. One of the weapons was used to kill 3 men by the same individuals, yet only 2 of those individuals appear in Achilles. So one of those individuals and their families aren't going to get the truth about how their loved ones were murdered. So some of those things stood out. And then obviously the routine destruction of information and intelligence by Special Branch. The 2 most senior investigators who were involved in the investigation into the murder of Sean Grahams refused to cooperate with the police ombudsman. And Boris Johnson and Brandon Lewis are talking about amnesties and about truth recovery. Yet here are 2 people who could have given families some truth about how their loved ones were murdered, yet they've refused.
All right. And finally, I'm just going to ask you, you've seen similar reports, Operation Greenwich, you've seen similar investigations, similar findings. Wherever there's an investigation, it seems the families are always vindicated, as your group of families was, and what the British said for many years leading up to that has been shown to be disproven. What do you conclude from that? How do you react to that?
Well, I agree with obviously what Siobhan and Bosco have said in terms of the preventability. In the Operation Greenwich, it looked into the murders of 19 citizens. Operation Achilles looked into the murder of 11 citizens and 1 other. So in the Damien Walsh report, so there's 31 killings where it is littered with agents. Yet Maria Anderson has said that none of those murders could have been prevented. Had Jim Clinton been warned that his life was in danger, Jim would have obviously took different steps to protect his family, his home, and himself in terms of going to and from work. The same in Operation Greenwich. A number of people weren't informed, and these people weren't informed by senior police officers at the highest level of the RUC. Someone decided not to inform families that their lives were in danger. And I think that's what stands out for me in this report, that there's a lack of preventability in these murders. If these agents were so good that they were prepared to protect those over the lives of over 30 citizens, well then they must have been telling them that the murders were being planned. And the RUC knew that these murders were being planned and failed to stop them. So these murders could have been prevented quite easily.
And we're paying them to go forward. All right. Thank you, Mark. We're next going to go to John Finucane, MP. And John, I know this is, you're looking at it from a different perspective. You're here as a representative elected as an MP from Sinn Féin. But I know, just as they were mentioning names like Billy Stobie and Ken Barrett, those same people, some of the same procedures, same weapons would have been involved in the murder of your father for being a civil rights lawyer. And I know that your family, you and particularly your mother, she spoke and testified very eloquently at a hearing last Tuesday in Washington. And I know that at a time when the idea of collusion was not accepted, it was rejected by the British. They ridiculed it, said anybody who said the British government would cooperate with criminals and murders was a scurrilous liar. Your family opened the door, campaigned, and brought that issue to the United States. So I know this is, you've come to this from a very different perspective from others. What do you think? What's your reaction to Operation Achille and the new findings?
Well, first of all, I think paying tribute to the perseverance and the dignity of all the families. And we see that today as we listen to Siobhan and Bosco and Mark. And I think that Operation Greenwich is one of many examples where the revelation of information is in spite of the actions of the British state and not because of them. The reason why the report was so strong is down to the perseverance of the families and the skill of those who support them. Their legal team, the team from Melrose for Justice, and I see Andre Murphy and Mark Thompson on the webinar today as well, and the work at times of investigative journalism. But it's also worth pointing out that there is a benefit, there's a mutual benefit from campaigning families. When we talk about the weapons used on the attack in the bookmakers being part of a shipment of weapons coming from South Africa, that is not information that was revealed because of the actions of the police ombudsman. That came from the actions of Brian Nelson, a British military agent, whose role was exposed as more and more information came out in relation to the murder of my father and many others. And I think that for me, that is the key point to take away from this. Everybody has spoken very well and in great detail about Operation Achille. But for me, it's one piece in a jigsaw. And if you take a bird's eye view, I think you start to see what exactly was happening here for a very long period of time. And the report and the analysis after talks about failings in policing. And Mark talks about the failure to warn people that they were under attack, whether it's Jim Clinton, whether it's Pat Finucane, and how people would have taken steps to protect themselves. But I think for me, that comes at it from the wrong angle, because this was not failings in police. This was the system working to perfection. This was the system doing what it was designed to do. Whenever people were failed to be warned that their life was in danger, that was not a failing. That was part of the policy that was going on. And whether it's my father not being warned from 1981 onwards, or whether it's Jim Clinton not being warned from previous years onwards, it's also worth saying, actually, that in the report into my father's murder, Desmond de Silva identifies the policy within the police that members from a Catholic background weren't to be trusted with being given information that their lives were under threat, because it could lead to the identification of agents that were being run within loyalist organizations. So whether it's the identification and recruitment of known murderers, the protection and rewarding of those individuals there afterwards, then I think what you see is a very clear policy. And this is all in the context of a police ombudsman's report. which only has the ability to look into the affairs of the police. When you start to include the security services, when you start to include the British Army, and when you have the natural skeleton and structure which has political oversight, then you start to realize that this was very much a policy that was created and resourced and run for many, many decades. And I think that what this report shows is that there needs to be a credible and transparent vehicle that can actually look at all of the circumstances that has arisen as a result of our past and the British state's role within it.
Right now, the British are proposing to have a Stormont House agreement that from 2014 that would include a historical investigations unit. If we want to take that away, take away Ombudsman Report, take away historical investigations, take away criminal prosecutions, take away civil suits, take away inquests, and replace them some sort of, they say they're going to give everybody's going to come in and tell the truth, or they'll give information all of a sudden. What impact, if the British pass these proposals, these families, you can see how much it means to them that after so many years, they were at least able to get this report, some degree of truth that they wouldn't have had otherwise. What impact, if the British proposals go through, do you think it'll have on hundreds of other families who've been fighting for the same sort of truth, who've also been victims of the same sort of killing?
Well, I think there's a couple of points to make on that. The preface and the context of all of this, as you've identified and alluded to, was as part of the New Decade, New Approach, which restored our assembly here. The British government made a commitment to legislate for Stormont House within 100 days. Stormont House being a political agreement of all the parties here and the guarantors of both the Irish and the British government. Pretty much on the mark of 100 days, they made the unilateral decision to renege on that. And in July last year, they announced their command paper and the proposals. And, you know, I hope Siobhan, Bosco and Mark forgive me for this, but I mean, my sense and my impression is that even that announcement injected an enormous amount of unnecessary, and I would say cruel, anxiety and worry amongst the families who did get the report, because they worried that they wouldn't get the report in time. And I know there was a lot of work to make sure that the Ombudswoman delivered that report. And I think that what these proposals represent, and I think Barry already touched on this, Senator Ward, is that this is as unprecedented an attack on the rule of law. And that's not my words, that's the words of academics within Queen's School of Law and human rights organisations who have compared this to other jurisdictions. And indeed, it is to the right and goes further than Pinochet did in Chile. So to remove criminal prosecutions, to remove the ability of any citizen to have the right of an inquest, to take a civil case, have any investigative process is unprecedented, especially in the context of being 23, nearly 24 years after a peace agreement, being the Good Friday Agreement. And I think that it is hard to avoid the conclusion that this is solely about protecting the interests of the British state. And I would say that the fact that there's a Tory government in power at the minute is, for me, slightly irrelevant, because some of the biggest challenges that we have faced as a family trying to secure truth and justice has come whenever a Labour government is in power in London. And indeed, when David Cameron spoke to my family in Downing Street about the De Silva report, he gestured out the window to the buildings in Whitehall and said, there are people in these buildings around here who don't even want me to give you this. So I think that shows that whoever is the occupant of number 10 is irrelevant in the face of the policy that the British government has. And I think that what this report of Operation Achille or Operation Greenwich, or indeed pick any report, because as you said, Martin, families are often vindicated whenever reports like this are published. But I think that what we do need now is a clear strategy in the interim, or sorry, at the first most pressing priority is to ensure that these proposals do not pass into legislation. But going back from that, I think that the pressure from America, a plan from the Irish government and our friends in America to ensure that Britain does tell its role about the past, does legislate for a mechanism whereby no matter how you lost a loved one, no matter how you were hurt as a result of our conflict, there are mechanisms there to provide satisfaction for you, whether that's through the civil courts, whether that's through the criminal courts, whether that is through receiving financial help and assistance if you have been injured. And I think that's what's key about all of this, and it's key about what the British government have done unilaterally, is that they have united everybody, whether it's the bipartisan support that we enjoy in America, whether it's the fact that every political party on this island rejects it, and indeed every political party in Britain, bar the Tory government, rejects this. This is about ensuring that all families, again, irrespective of how they have lost a loved one or who it was that inflicted the hurt upon them, that every family must have the ability to access truth and access justice.
Danny, we're going to throw it back to you. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Martin. Great words from everybody here today. You'll be able to rewatch this webinar really as soon as it's over. We will get the Congressman's full words on. But I think what really hit me is what John touched on there, is the cross-party support. We always call it bipartisan support in the United States, but the cross-party support. When we have, Senator Blaney, the spokesman on Northern Ireland for Fianna Fáil, Senator Ward, the spokesperson for justice, for Fine Gael. We have John, a member of Sinn Féin, who's also a victim, not just a family member, but a victim. He was there when his father was brutally murdered. So we have all these groups working together, the U.S. Congress, the executive branch, the president spoke out against it. And I think I would add the concern I have as just a citizen here in the United States of America, happen to be at the moment the president of the Ancient Order of Hibernians, is not only do we need to stop the amnesty proposals today, but there needs to be a guarantee that as soon as they get what they want, the British government doesn't come back to these type of actions. Because what we've seen, as long as I can remember, is they'll make an agreement when it comes to deal with the North Ireland, and the first thing they do is they change it or want to change it, whether it's the protocol, whether it's something to do with justice. And we need to be a partner with countries who will hold to their agreements with everyone, not just to the most powerful. That being said, we're going to start moving to closing comments. And the first one we're going to invite in is our National Vice President from the Ancient Order of Hibernians, Sean Pender from New Jersey. Sean?
Thank you, Danny. Good morning and good afternoon to all. Great compelling testimony today. Thank you, Senators Blaney, Ward, and John for coming, and Bosco, Siobhan, and Mark. We continue to support you and all victims of loss in the North. And I want to let you know that that inspiration and that drive laid the groundwork for Martin and myself to work with the Lantos Commission. In the late summer of last year, we worked with the staffers on the Lantos Commission to bring this pending legislation to the light in the form of a hearing. And we're proud to say that the result of that was a very well received hearing out of the Lantos Commission on Tuesday that was called the Northern Ireland Accountability at Risk. It was chaired by Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey and McGovern of Massachusetts, where they were also joined by Congressman Boyle and Congresswoman Lee of Pennsylvania and Texas. Congressman Smith called the entire process right now nothing other than impunity masquerading as immunity. He said it was basically a unilateral decision by the UK to put the statute of limitations in that will undermine peace, and it's profoundly unjust and cavalier. McGovern added that in the name of efficiency and reconciliation, they're trying to do this, but there'll be definitely no accountability and no reconciliation because of it. They must, as he said, it's morally necessary to do the right thing, and this is not. Congressman Boyle mentioned that Britain is actually moving backwards to prevent the pathway to justice and to strip families of their legal rights and deny the right of investigation to the thousands of cases that are going on. John's mother, of course, Geraldine, spoke eloquently, as she always does, and reaffirmed that all the Britons are trying to do with this is to sweep under the carpet these cases forever. And it's not due to a lack of evidence, but because they want to simply sweep it under the rug. Mark Thompson and Alan McBride from both sides of the community, RFJ and WAVE, and themselves victims of loss, spoke compassionately of the victims and their ideas on this, that of course it should not go through. And Louise Mallender from CAJ, from a legal basic, called it the most sweeping amnesty that is illegal and illegitimate. And as John said, it was far more sweeping than the Pinochet amnesty of the late 70s. But I think what was compelling was John Butcher, who is the police sergeant, I believe, or head of the police in Bedfordshire, who talked about leading the Canova investigation right now, that he is getting access to more and more information. Now, we can only hope this is true because unfortunately what we've heard in the past has not always come to fruition. But he did say he thought that we were at the tipping point, that the more weight we can get behind this, perhaps we can get more and more information. I think one of the things that Butcher said in his testimony was he came out and he asked that the British government release the still unreleased portions of the Stevens inquiries. The Stevens inquiries went on again from the late 80s to the 2000s. And when you think about that and what we're talking about today, Achille and Greenwich before that, Stevens found that the 210 arrests that he looked into, 207 had ties to illegal paramilitaries. The De Silva case, which gave vindication to the Bloody Sunday families, also said that 85% of all the intelligence that they recovered was from the UDA had come from the Army and MI5. Then you add to Ballymurphy, the 50-year cover-up, Greenwich, the 19 murders in South Derry, and the counselor, Eddie Fullerton, and now Achille. It's all the same. It's just all the same story. This has been going on for forever. It's been a process that the English government has endorsed and indeed mapped out. So for Brandon Lewis to continually to come over here and his speech to our elected officers and official is to tell that there's no new evidence. But the fact of it is there's troves of evidence out there. The reports that I have just mentioned, it's just the fact that they don't want it to get out. And there are solutions that are out there. The solutions that all parties agreed to in this the Stormont House agreement are now being pushed away. Why? Because they don't want any more Achille reports. They don't want any more Greenwich reports. We have on this call today the leading voices and the leading members of the parties in the Irish government. We have spoken to parties in the north of Ireland, and we have Republicans and Democrats that are all together in this, that this legislation cannot go on. So to the leaders of the United Kingdom government, and particularly the Conservative Party, you are holding the truth hostage right now. How can you live with the fact that years from now, when they look back, that you would want to have your name associated? All these people want is the truth. There are mechanisms there. There are reports that are available, and they need to come out. Irish American continues to be dedicated to work to get that truth, and we will not stop. We will not stop until we get the answers for Bosco, Siobhan, Mark, and so many more. Thank you today for all who participated.
Thank you, Sean. As always, great words from our Vice President, Sean Pender. We're going to go next to Dolores Desch. But before we do, just let you know that we're going to go to closing comments after that. There's so many people on that we'd like to hear from, but time won't allow it. So when Dolores is done, we're going to go to Bosco and follow that same for our closing comments. And at the end, Martin will talk about some of the other groups that are on with us today that have been very helpful in pushing House Resolution 888 and all the justice issues. But that being said, our chair for the Ladies Ancient Order Hibernians America Freedom for Ireland Committee, Dolores Desch.
Thank you, Danny. I just want to say thank you to all the panelists today. A great webinar again, especially the families, Mark, Siobhan, and Bosco. We know how difficult this is for you to retell your story again and again, but it's so very important for everyone to hear it and to hear what your families have fought for and been very successful at getting, which is the truth. And so, you know, we see again collusion. We see guns that have been traced to multiple killings. We've seen, you know, the police turning a blind eye to reports of threats against families. And, you know, we've seen other issues such as evidence either not being collected or being destroyed. So, you know, these are so very important to have these investigations. And collusion is nothing new in the North. It's been going on for years. We just were reminded by that with the recent 100th anniversary of the Weaver Street bombing, where children were killed. And a month later, the jury said, let's have an investigation, and it was never done. So, you know, just continue to fight for justice. We're behind you 100%. The LAOH is pushing Resolution 888 with our members, having them contact their members of Congress. And just want to say thank you and solidarity from the LAOH.
Thank you, Dolores. And I must say, you have the best background of any of us there in your office at your home, I believe. And thank you for all the efforts you do on behalf of the Ladies Ancient Order Hibernians. We couldn't do it without you. Next up, we're going to hear again from Bosco Kennedy. Bosco?
I'd just like to say that this report has brought us justice, or brought us truth, but we still need justice. And there's enough information in this report to bring us justice. But we need the PSNI to stop protecting the killers of our loved ones, but also the special branch handlers. They're being protected as well. And I would call upon everybody in this webinar who has power to call on Simon Byrne to direct his officers to go after the killers and the police handlers and the special branch. I want to thank everybody for allowing me to be on this call today.
Thank you, Bosco, not just for your time, but we're with you always with the justice, and we will have a large group of Hibernians, men and women and friends over in April, I think 50 at the moment. So we hope we have an opportunity to say hello in person, and we appreciate all your work. Siobhan Clinton.
I'd just like to take the opportunity just to thank everyone involved today. As a family, out of the report that we would like the special branch of the PSNI investigated and prosecuted. So we would hope that with, you know, the power that you have, that we can hopefully as a family and as victims of the report, that we can push for that as an outcome.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your time here today, and we look forward to working with you and your family into the future. And I think one of the best things said there just a few minutes ago by Bosco is we have the truth. Now we need to move to justice. Mark Sykes.
I think I just want to obviously echo what Bosco said, but I think we are not finished. I mean, we are looking for justice for our loved ones, but we should bear in mind that there is 400 other families in the Ombudsman waiting on a report. And if Boris Johnson has his way, those 400 families will be denied justice. There's thousands of other families, but there's 400 families sitting waiting, and the British state are starving the police ombudsman of resources and funding so that these type of reports don't come out. That needs to be challenged also, and with the support of the American administration and obviously the work at AOH do and others, that hopefully that message can be sent to the British that the Ombudsman needs resource and families need truth and justice. There's hundreds of families out there who will be denied truth and justice if Boris Johnson has his way.
Thank you. And as I said with everyone else, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciated it. And we will look forward to working with you. And we're all going to continue until we have justice. Next, if we can hear from Senator Blaney, Fianna Fáil spokesperson. Senator?
Thank you, Danny. I'm actually glad that former Councillor Eddie Fullerton was mentioned today. He's a former Donegal representative county councillor, and he was a very close friend of my late father's. And my father was actually in his company one of the nights there was a botched attempt to take his life. And it's right to remember people like that, but it's also right to take up the point that John Finucane mentioned, that in dealing with all these issues and all these victims, and I suppose getting to the bottom of truth and justice, there is no difference in the pain felt by a family from a Catholic background versus a family of a Protestant background. There are so many victims across the board. There has to be an approach that is dealing with all victims, not to take away from the impact of this actual Ombudsman report, and not to hold back on an investigation that can now take place as a result of Marie Anderson's report. But we have to get to a point where, for me, something along the lines of what Robin Eames and Dennis Bradley were doing in dealing with legacy and the past. There has to be a whole, all-in approach of dealing with all issues, all legacy, because there can't be healing in Northern Ireland. We can't be through peace into the future until these legacies are dealt with. And I'm someone that's very much interested in working with colleagues across the board from any background that wants to push that agenda forward. And I believe government representatives across the board in Ireland wish to do that as well. Thank you very much for having us on today and to with the opportunity. And Danny, to you and all your colleagues. And if you're in Ireland in April, we as a party and members of the Good Friday Agreement Committee would certainly love to meet you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Senator Barry Ward, Fine Gael.
Thanks very much, Danny. And thanks again for having us. I think this is actually a very useful and very important tool for continuing to keep these issues to the forefront. I agree with almost everything that's been said here today, but one of the things that I think the British government forgets is that just because during the Troubles there was a quasi state of war, or there was an unusual state of public law, doesn't mean that people who were victims, and as Neil said, on either side, it doesn't mean that people who were victims during that time are any less entitled to the due process and the ordinary justice provisions that we would expect. And I think the British government is forgetting that singularly when they're pursuing this policy. But I also want to congratulate everyone who was involved in this. It was a great webinar, a very important subject, and I'm grateful to have been here. I would reiterate what has been said by other speakers about the attitude of the Irish government to this. Our door is open. We have a very strong and very clear position on this, and it is not acceptable at any level. But thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate your time. John Finucane, MP.
Thank you. I wasn't aware that I was allowed to make closing comments, which is why I just put it into the chat. My thanks to everybody. So I'll just repeat it now. Danny, Sean, Martin, and Dolores, thank you very much again for hosting today's webinar. I think for me, probably one of the most insulting words that was used when the British government introduced these proposals was that it was introduced on the basis of promoting and embedding reconciliation. And I think that is so fundamentally intellectually dishonest, but it also actually injected hurt and pain unnecessarily onto families. And if these proposals do proceed and succeed, all they will do is delay truth, which is very much part of British government policy, because families, whilst conflict was ongoing, didn't have the means or the capacity, didn't have the space or the safety at times to ask the questions about what happened. But what you see now, which is very much shown on this meeting and shown elsewhere, is that it's the children and the grandchildren and sometimes great-grandchildren who are asking questions and going to solicitors, going to human rights groups, and utilising the powers that they currently have to remove those powers. And I don't say this to throw in some hyperbole. but I think it will set back reconciliation, possibly generationally. And as difficult as our past is, as hurtful as it will be, we are a society that is more than capable of addressing our past whilst also building for a better future. And the role of the United States in that process is absolutely vital. So I'm really encouraged by the comments in the chat where people will contact their local representatives, because I think addressing and identifying a strategy alongside the Irish government to ensure that the British government live up to their proposals, I think is key to embedding the peace that was so hard fought for in the first place. So again, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, John. And everybody on this webinar today, take heed to those words. If your representative is not signed on to Resolution 888 as a co-sponsor as of today, make sure you get on the phone with them Monday, Tuesday, and every day until you see their name there. And before we go back to Martin, take a look at this screen. These men and their parties, men and women of their parties, have elevated this issue, this justice issue, this human rights issue to all parties in Ireland. And together, we will continue to work until we have a lasting peace and we have justice for everyone involved. And our chair, who's done a wonderful job with this, I'm going to bring him on next for his closing comments, Martin Galvin. Martin?
Danny, I want to thank you for organizing this, for allowing this. We are able to bring speakers like these to the United States, across the United States, and to have them heard in the North, and even in the British mainland itself, from them because of these webinars. Look, the reason that people like Bosco, like Siobhan, like Mark Sykes come and relive what their family tragedy was because they think America is going to be important. All these families are looking for. They want to have the Stormont House Agreement. They want to have the right to simply use Ombudsman Report, to simply use civil suits, to simply use the things that the British government either have under existing law or have agreed to get the truth. And it could be the truth for everybody. There's a special circumstance when the British state is involved with murder, but everyone should have the right under the Stormont House Agreement to a historical investigation, to have the way to find the truth if their loved one was killed in a controversial killing. Now, today in the United States, we're joined by a number of groups. The Ancient Order of Hibernians is joined by the Irish American Unity Conference, by the Brehons, by the Ad Hoc Committee for the Good Friday Agreement, by Irish Northern Aid, by the Ladies AOH. And we've shown a great degree of unity to work together on this. We have bipartisanship on that resolution. You see that in the signatories. They go from Republicans on the right to Democrats on the left, all can join together and work on this. We have the Irish organizations all joining together and work on it. And we have the three largest political parties represented in the Dáil, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and Sinn Féin. Together, I don't know on how many issues, but on this issue, certainly. They are together, they are as one, they are fighting for justice. They come to us because they feel that we can play a crucial role. This week, we had a crucial congressional hearing. We have Resolution 888 going forward. We have this webinar to remind us of what is at stake and how important what we do is to the people in the north of Ireland. So let's, as Danny just said, go out, contact your representatives, get more signatures, push this resolution, push congressional action, make sure that when the Irish government, when all the parties were fighting these British amnesty laws go forward, that they know America is clearly with them. The American administration and Congress are with them, and we are going to be there to make sure that these proposals, and they say, put a line under the past, don't underline the past, and have the British getting one final injustice that goes down generations. We had a cover up when your relative was killed, and now we're going to continue the whitewashing your generation. Don't let it happen. We've got to work together. America can play a leading role and a crucial role. We're doing that. Be a part of it.
Thank you, Martin. I want to thank again one more time all our guests, our political representatives from the three major parties in Ireland. And I just popped on Tim Noonan. Tim is pinch hitting for Chris Cook, and he's doing all our background work. And want to thank you for your time. He's the president of his division in Chicago, and a lot of Irish Americans in Chicago I know are with you and with everybody in Ireland seeking the same justice so many of ours. And I think, Tim, you have some closing music for us?
I do indeed.
Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
Was a day unlike any other at the end of January, where the people marched together for the rights and equality. From Bishop's Field to Shoulder, from Cregan to the Bogside, till they met a grave injustice and the city cried. When she awoke that Sunday, there was none who could foretell that for 13 of her children was their last day on this earth. As the world looked on in disbelief, and the Fleet Street presses lied with the sorrows of a mother, the city cried. And through tears they filled an ocean when she saw what they had done for demanding equal treatment. They took 14 of her sons. So remember Bloody Sunday, and remember those who died, and don't forget what happened while a city cried. There was Jackie Duddy, William Nash, young Gerald Donaghy, John Johnson, Willie McKinney, and Paddy Doherty. There was Barney McGuigan and Michael McDade and Kevin McElhenney, Hugh Gilmore, John Young, Jim Ray, Michael Kelly and Jared McKinney. And the tears that filled the ocean soon became a tidal wave, and it washed away the debris that besmirched their 14 names. So remember Bloody Sunday, and remember those who died, and don't forget what happened or why the city cried. God bless and keep my children, says Dara with sad smile.